And welcome back to another edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. I'm your host, Sean Meyers, joined by a salty Justin Lowery. Justin, good to see you again. And before we get into the week's topics, are you going to be okay to make it through the show without, causing any physical harm to anyone?
I'm going to try my very best.
Okay.
We'll see what I can do.
So this is going to be a little bit different of a show. We're hoping to, spice things up. Typically, we talk about what happens on Raw, the biggest takeaways from that, what happens on SmackDown. If there's pay-per-views, we preview those, maybe give our thoughts on a recent pay-per-view, and then we kind of just talk on some general topics in wrestling. I kind of want to start and work backwards. This week has been very significant, and for the most part, it is significant because all the news pretty much relating to WWE has been negative, whether it be issues that they're having with their ratings, which are really, no joke, they're about as bad as they've ever been in the history of Raw and SmackDown. Whether it be some of their former superstars now capturing the attention of millions of people just because they're not in WWE anymore, whether it be Vince McMahon treating some of his talent potentially very poorly, the decision to go back to Saudi Arabia. There's been a lot of very questionable or just downright negative news stories that have come out about WWE this week. And with potentially competition on the horizon, it seems like this really, while money is still being made, this could be a point of no return for most fans when it comes to WWE.
Yeah, I told you, before we went, did this, I did not watch Raw or SmackDown, not a second.
That's not necessarily boycotting per se, but it's just not a number one priority.
Right. Monday night I umpire baseball games. That was umping. So by the time I got home, ate dinner, and took a shower, it was time for me to go to bed. Tuesday night was more of me just not tuning in. And I actually think SmackDown's better than Raw. There was just a couple other things going on. So it wasn't like me saying, I am not watching this. It was more that it's not even a first, second, third, or fourth priority for me right now. I don't think ratings really matter all much to them. They are pretty pathetic, and you think sooner or later, they should start to worry. But
it becomes public perception at this point too, though, doesn't it?
Well, you would think. Fox already paid them the big money, so their sense. So I could see if they're still waiting for a deal, and people are looking at this going, "Wait, maybe we shouldn't do this." Since the deals have been signed, I think they're pretty much.
And USA's locked in with Raw as well. I think
right.
maybe it was 3 years, but either way, those are done deals.
Way, they're safe for the near future, foreseeable future, you can say, with enough time to rebound.
But if you're a wrestling fan who's maybe sort of on the fence about WWE, and you find out, well, now my good friends don't watch wrestling, my siblings don't watch wrestling, and I look at the ratings, no one's watching it. Well, all of a sudden, it's not the cool thing to do. And I know you could say that's been the case for a decade, but these numbers, someone said this, and I didn't look it up to see if it was true, but someone tweeted that the ECW incarnation on Sci-Fi, which was like a joke of a show, actually was doing better ratings than what SmackDown got this week.
I didn't see that.
Let's say that is factual. Let's just say that was correct. Is that not insane to think about?
Yes, but wrestling, like you talked about, it's not very cool right now. Wrestling goes through stages where it becomes insanely popular, very cool. Then it dips, then it spikes, then it dips, then it spikes. We've seen that throughout the history. It hasn't really peaked since 2001, 2002 maybe, and started to slide a little bit in 3-4 when they started losing.
And that's when WWE was without real competition.
Right, and then you started losing like Austin and The Rock. Cena came along and pretty much carried the company as their only star.
Well, they had a great group of young stars. Some of them didn't pan out as well as they thought, but you look at Cena, you look at Orton, those are two.
Well, coming out like 2012, you had Cena, Lesnar, Orton, and Batista wasn't too far behind.
2002, you mean, right.
Which
yes.
Batista was older, but all relatively fresh. All
superstar potential, you could see it.
Superstar potential, all had success. Batista actually has found success in Hollywood. Cena has now found success in Hollywood. Lesnar has found success, more outside of the WWE too, with MMA, and he played professional football.
And Orton's
So
been a 15-year workhorse who maybe not everyone's favorite, but he has certainly lived up to his
right,
potential as
but
well.
if you look, 3 out of the 4 has found more. You could say arguably more success outside of the WWE universe than within it. And honestly, ever since Cena, they've yet to be able to make a true star. Cena was a true star. They've tried with Roman and they failed, and they have fallen flat for the last 10, 12 years of trying to create a new star. And I think that's because Vince kind of lost the touch.
Let me ask you this. Could Dean Ambrose have been a star? Because his name is in the news and what has happened with him. Perception is everything. People all of a sudden, because of a minute and a half or maybe even less than that, minute and a half long video, are so intrigued by what's next. Dean Ambrose really hasn't been interesting in WWE for probably since the Shield broke up, right?
Yeah, I mean, when the first Shield came on,
He was the leader. People really don't think about it. He was, at least for the first 6 months, a year.
absolutely, he was the leader. He's the one who always got the mic time, and everybody always pegged him as the future breakout star. The next Brian Pillman. He was compared to Brian Pillman a lot, which, there are some characteristics there. But then, when the Shield broke up, what they did with his character, it made it very corny, very hokey, and I don't think that was the right direction. But with their PG, ways, that's basically what you can do with him. You can't go edgier with him like you did with Brian Pillman back in the day because it just wouldn't be allowed.
Right.
And clearly that upset got to him because, from all accounts, the reason he left is because he wants more creative control. He hated what they were doing with him personally.
Well, let's look at it. He was very interesting and hot when he had that WrestleMania feud with Brock Lesnar, and that just fell flat. And I think that was Lesnar's fault more than anything. And then it seemed like they kind of lost some faith in Ambrose. Yes, he was a world champion, but he never felt like the biggest guy in the company. But just fast forward to 6 months ago, he turns on Rollins. People are legitimately excited to see the feud because of how it happened in such a shocking moment. And then, worst case scenario, Ambrose becomes generic heel 101, and it was bizarre. Right? I mean...
Well, the whole thing was bizarre. But, I'm going to put some blame on Ambrose. I mean, remember, he's the reason where the Stone Cold podcast is no longer on the network. It was some bizarre interview he had with Austin. It was weird. He doesn't handle media too well. I mean, he's never going to be the face of the company because he's just not that type of personality. He had a title reign, and it was horrible. It was flat. Is that his fault? Maybe partially some of his fault, some of creative. Maybe he wanted to do more and he just wasn't allowed. I
don't feel like it was the perfect time for him to be champion either when it happened.
When it happened, people were excited, but it just a lot of
it wasn't like a Kofi Kingston or Seth Rollins this year where it's like yes, I'm ready for this now.
Well, Rollins was more, we just don't want it to be Brock,
right?
And Kofi was more, yes, Kofi, but. I'm interested. I watched the video. You text me, my thoughts. I thought it was cool. It was clearly something a little different that you haven't seen, WWE do. I wonder.
There's a lot of people thinking this is WWE. I don't think there's any chance. I would put that at 1%.
Well, I saw someone said I think it was Bully Ray said like there's no way this is a work because they would lose so much money in rebranding. Like, first off, the Dean Ambrose name, all of his characters, everything they've done's been backed by this.
Well, even if they lost money in that regard, people are like, whoa, it's professionally made video. The guy's made millions of dollars. He can afford to pay someone professional to make this video for him. Or if it's a company that he's already secretly agreed to terms with, I'm sure they wouldn't mind helping out.
Yeah, well, true, and that's what was going to be my point. Is that was very professionally done, and then I want to know, was that from his brain?
I would say yes. Would be my guess.
Then that's actually pretty impressive, and that tells me there's a lot more going on there than we were ever able to see on Monday Night Raw.
But I feel like that's a major issue in WWE. A lot of these guys have what it takes to be creative on their own, but they don't get that freedom. A guy like Elias does, but like 80% of the roster, they do whatever is scripted for them, and that's it.
Right. Well, remember countless interviews with Vince. He wants people to grab the brass ring, show that they can do it. They don't let anybody show anything anymore. They They don't
CM
let them.
Punk had freedom on the mic, and he made the most of it. That's a rarity, though, for guys, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, but people back in the day, the Rock, Austin, they had freedom. Man, Mick Foley had freedom. I mean, these guys had
DX,
freedom.
yeah, right.
You know, and the fans believe it more when it's coming because the person understands their character the best. They know if it's connecting or not connecting. Not some writer in a room who probably doesn't even know much about wrestling, but he just knows how to write stories, and he thinks that he can connect it to a wrestling audience. This isn't a movie audience. This is a wrestling audience, and the fans need to feel that connection.
Let me wrap up the Ambrose thing real quick. So, John Moxley, whatever. A lot of people are excited about that. I'm going to say flat out, what he was before he came to WWE, I'm not interested in. I thought that was, for the most part, he just basically mutilated himself. He was kind of disgusting. If he can sort of find a happy medium between the Dean Ambrose and what he used to be, I don't think at this age, with the money he's made and with a very attractive wife that probably doesn't want him coming home with glass in his eyeballs or something like that, I don't think he's going to completely return to the old version, but a lot edgier than what he had been, I think, could be interesting. But, I mean, John Moxley, to me, that means nothing. I didn't really ever see him wrestle, but what I looked up, it was just basically mutilating himself. So I hope that's not his future.
I'm pretty sure, I can't remember when, just a couple months ago, I read an interview that he did, and he talked about how he would never go back to doing those styles of matches.
No one ever should do those matches.
When he was younger and he was trying to get noticed.
Are you surprised that he looks as normal as he does now with some of the stuff that he did?
Yeah, you don't really see it too much, like any scarring on his forehead because he did some crazy hardcore stuff. I mean, he really
We're
did.
not talking like WWE hardcore, like thumbtacks and, getting thrown off a ladder. We're talking like just stuff you don't even want to imagine if you're not into that type of wrestling.
Right, yeah, exactly. I'm interested. I know a lot of people are thinking he's going to All Elite Wrestling. I don't think that, honestly. Actually, I thought when he was quitting, he just wanted a break. Like, he wasn't even going to do it.
I think that was sort of the consensus, and it seems like he's maybe gave that indication so that Vince wouldn't throw so many obstacles in his way.
Yeah, because, I mean, apparently he's already taken indie bookings for June. And I think, too, maybe he saw that there's been guys outside of the company have been able to make lots of money just doing their own thing and not even signing with a company. That doesn't mean he can do dates at Ring of Honor, go to Japan, do some dates, go to Mexico, and probably even show up to All Elite Wrestling for like 4 or 5 dates. Not sign a contract, but agree to do a couple dates.
But what if this guy wants to do acting as well? I mean, he really could do whatever at this point without any commitment if he decides to go that path.
I think maybe that's his plan right now, is to see what's out there for him, test the waters, and be in control of his own character. And if his character is really great, then we can really put the blame completely on WWE's shoulders.
Let's talk about some other characters that they have just butchered recently. I want to start with sort of tying in what happened on Raw with the recurring issue in this company. We'll talk about the Revival. Justin, the Revival in NXT, they had an argument for being the best tag team in the world for a period of time. Now, I think longevity-wise, you probably look at some other teams ahead of them. The Usos have been incredible. If you go outside of WWE, people would say the Briscoes. I'm not huge on the Young Bucks, but they certainly have done it at a high level for a long time. But the Revival is in that conversation. They have been pretty much a joke, and when they first came up, injuries stopped their momentum. That happens, and you understand Vince not immediately pushing them to the sky. But rumor came out, about 2 months ago, that they wanted to get out of their contracts. Now it seems like they're being punished, and WWE has sort of gone to take this approach of punishing people, maybe not right away, but within a first, couple of months that won out. They basically made a mockery of the Revival. They showed them shaving their back. Now, yes, that happens to heels all the time, but it just feels like it's sort of vindictive how they're being booked, and they're, really one in a handful of different groups or individuals who've spoken out and probably will end up suffering as a result in their WWE stints.
Yeah, I mean, I read the back shaving segment is a direct thing to make fun of them because
But it's kind of corny. I mean, some people liked it. I thought it was corny, right?
It was corny. I mean, that's something you would have saw in like the Attitude, era. But it's to make fun of them, humiliate them, and that's what Vince, and that's typical Vince humor. He thinks like ha ha ha, and I think was it Dash I just saw the other day that they added 2 months that one of those guys'
Yes,
contracts.
Dash Wilder for being injured.
They can do that, right? Like, if the guy wants out, you don't want to use him. You don't really, like. That's just being petty.
But apparently they offered him significant, like massive contracts.
Look, if they hate it so much that they're willing to turn down a 5-year, $500,000 per year deal, like guaranteed, not including bonuses and merch checks, then let them go.
I think I would agree to that contract. And then if they don't use me, my body is spared. If they do use me, at least I'm on TV, but I'm set for life regardless after that.
Right.
And you don't have to worry about breaking your neck on the indies for, $1,000 a show or whatever.
I think they're clear as day would go to All Elite Wrestling. I mean, they've said they wanted to face the Young Bucks.
Which is weird because, I think they had legit heat with the Young Bucks, at least for a while. I don't know if they sort of smoothed that over.
That's what makes the best feuds, because they're the anti-Young Bucks. They're wrestling style.
Right.
No flips, just fists. So that would be actually, there's a great storyline. That would be a great feud. Just based off of that. Vince is being petty. Luke Harper wrote, he wanted out of his contract.
And Luke Harper, it seemed like from what I saw, went about it the right way, right?
I mean, Vince told him no. Vince said, nope, you're going to sit at home because I'm not going to release you. And apparently, Vince hates him. He doesn't like him. He doesn't think he's any good. He wanted him to talk with. I read that Vince told him he needs to talk with a Southern accent to do this Southern character, and he couldn't do it, or he said no to it. And Vince's like, well, then I'm not going to use you. You're just not going to do anything. So if you're not going to use a guy, and he wants to leave, he's already 39 years old. He's not a young kid. Let him go. Why are you so? It's just. And
as good as he is, he's, to your point, he's not going to be a face of a major company. He'll be a good in-ring worker, but.
Right. It makes no sense to me, and apparently,
Neville was a way bigger deal leaving WWE than what Luke Harper would be.
Right. I would be more willing to do that. He made Neville wait. Apparently, Leo Rush now turned down a 5-year, $300,000 a year contract.
He's supposedly in some heat backstage.
Yeah. Well, apparently he has a lot of heat, but he's saying he wants more money. Who knows, but. It's one of those things where he asked for his release, and I guess they're not granting that, so they're just not going to use it.
So here's the thing. You can look at it two ways. WWE's making examples so that the current roster doesn't try to take these liberties. But if you want to bring in top stars from around the world, they pay attention to this stuff, right? If you're a top star, aren't you at least in the back of your head thinking, you know what, no matter how much money they offer me, they're not treating these people who are unhappy correctly. So maybe I'm going to second guess coming here. And a guy like Joey Ryan, supposedly a hot commodity, that has to be at the forefront of his mind as he potentially negotiates.
Right. Well, and why do they want Joey Ryan? What do you? It's just the point of.
There's zero chance that he would look like what he does now if he makes it to the main roster.
Right. So it's just the point of keeping them away from other promotions. Sasha Banks hasn't been on TV since what? The Monday after WrestleMania? Was it WrestleMania?
Yeah, I think she was not even on the next night. I think Bayley had to do something on her own.
She apparently wants to quit.
But the rumor is she might get a big push when she comes back.
Well, they did that with the Revival. They threatened to leave. They gave them the belts, and then they thought that would be happy enough. They still said, no, we're not re-signing. So then that's when they dropped it and got punished. Who else? There was somebody else that wanted to... Oh, the story... I don't know if you saw that people are purposely failing drug tests to try to get fired, and
that's bad. I mean, don't do that. But
here's the thing:
that's very unprofessional, no matter what working condition.
If somebody wants to quit their job that bad, and you're still not letting them go after failing drug tests, and you're being hypocritical with your drug testing procedures too.
Right. Well, so this opens up a discussion, and we do want to talk at least a little bit about Raw and SmackDown. But is this as simple as Vince McMahon needs to go and this is an easy fix? Because when I look at it, it's not dire straits because the roster is so talented. It's all stuff that happens above the roster. The long-term booking, the creative writing, the lack of creativity and freedom for the wrestlers, and really the people making the decisions who to push, who not, and how they're handling the talent. That happy talent is going to produce much better than people that are working begrudgingly.
Here's my thoughts. One, you have too many people. Not enough airtime, too many people. So people are going to become unhappy because you have too many people signed.
Even
And
with
that's
NXT and 205 Live and NXT UK's
there's
options.
just too many people. There's not enough people to go around. Eventually, people are going to get stagnant. They're going to want a new challenge or not be happy with their spot, and they're going to want to leave. Now, people are finding out they're not the only game in town. So, maybe 3 years ago, people were happy just to get paid and not be used because it's better than making $50 a night. Now there's opportunity, whether it's Japan, Mexico, Ring of Honor, All Elite Wrestling, opportunity to be paid more and show your craft and maybe make yourself a bigger star. I see they're bringing back Goldberg. Why?
You know why? Because the Prince of Saudi Arabia or whatever loves stuff from 1998, Justin.
Well, true, but
they don't have updated versions of wrestling over there. He only can see stuff from the late 90s.
The Attitude Era, but apparently Vince really wanted Goldberg back because he's a big name that All Elite Wrestling could sign that could bring people back from the past. That's what I read today.
That would make All Elite going down the same path as TNA.
Well, actually, I said to myself, if All Elite Wrestling would sign Goldberg, I would be that wouldn't make me be excited. That would be oh no, All Elite.
Well, Batista, that was a rumor for a while too, and that didn't really make any sense. Now Jericho's a little different. He's older, but that's a signing that the hardcore wrestling fans can get behind.
Right. I mean, Goldberg, no. And then so Goldberg's going to Saudi Arabia, and then they're going back to Saudi Arabia. They just executed another 7 or 8 people last week. And they're going to go down there.
It's all about the money, and this has negative perceptions, and this is why you see people like John Oliver speaking out and why public perception is not in favor of WWE right now, even though the roster is as good as ever.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, they have a lot of PR issues, and the ratings keep getting lower and lower every week.
So, last thing I want to touch on before we get into Raw and SmackDown, Justin. I saw another, I probably should do a better job of giving credit to the people that tweet these out, but I saw someone that was sort of, snarky and said, record low rating on, SmackDown, one of the worst ever on Raw. This is what happens when you appease the indie darlings and, the people are saying, oh, you got to make Becky the champion, you got to make Kofi. I sort of agree Kofi really probably is not long-term best for ratings, but I think it was the right decision, no doubt. Do you buy into that at all, that they're giving too much to the hardcore internet lifelong wrestling fans and not enough into the casual fans? Or is it sort of more of a case, what you mentioned before, of just not creating stars regardless of if they appeal to the indie?
They're not creating stars. Name me a person on SmackDown right now that would put the belt on and ratings would go up. Don't say Roman Reigns, because the ratings are not going up with him. They haven't been.
How about a heel Roman Reigns?
It's worth a shot, but I don't even think that. Honestly, who? There is nobody.
But that seems like that's the type of thing that you're like, okay, finally, that's a good move.
Well, I saw a rumor, and I hope to God it's false. I saw the story that there is talk going around of Goldberg back in Saudi Arabia defeat Kobe Kingston for the WWE Championship, and will set up him and Lesnar again at SummerSlam. That there's been talk of that. If that's true, oh my God!
That would be.
Words won't be described, but that sounds like a Vince thing because Vince knows Vince doesn't trust or count on anybody on the current stars. He has to keep relying on the old guys because at some point he's lost his ability.
And that well's going to dry up if it hasn't already.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of issues. There's no doubt. This is, and I'm not going to say the inside sources or whatever, but I think morale's pretty low if you're a superstar right now, right? Even though you might be getting more money in your contract because of the competition, doesn't seem like it's a vibrant environment to work in.
Not at all. And you hear stories about these wrestlers, these guys that are pitching all these different ideas for their characters, and they get shot down left and right. It's only what Vince wants you to do.
But back to that question, is it just Vince McMahon? Is this an easy fix if we find out tomorrow Triple H takes over creative?
I do think it would get better because Vince is the final say-so on everything. I mean, look at Dean Malenko just quit as an agent. The Road Dogg stepped down. We're not even talking wrestlers. They're losing backstage people who just can't take it anymore.
So you're to an extent much more up on WCW and its downfall. Does this bring back any memories, or is it completely different?
I think it's different. At WCW, there was chaos. Nobody knew who exactly was in charge. Like the inmates were running the asylum there. There was Vince
This you
clearly,
know who's in charge. It just doesn't seem like it's the right person to call the shots
I
anymore.
think I think his time has passed, and I don't. The sad part is I don't think he'll ever give it up until the day he dies. And I have confidence in Triple H because I've seen what he's done with NXT, and if he can bring some of that to Raw and SmackDown, and I think he has a better understanding of the current climate and what.
Right, he couldn't just mirror NXT for Raw and SmackDown. There would have to be changes because that's a more broad audience you're appealing to, but some of the same ingredients I think would work.
Right, but the matches, they got to create stars. Can Triple H create a star? I guess we could find out. I mean, he knows that he can put on great matches, great storytelling with what he runs, but can he create a star?
Would you say, I mean, like, Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa seem like stars in NXT? They would never have success like that, 1/10 of that level on the main roster, because it's Vince and not Triple H.
You would have to be presented as a star from the very get-go. Vince doesn't present guys from stars from the very get-go.
Except for Lacey Evans.
Is that really presenting as a star?
I don't know.
Vince probably thinks that's the greatest thing. Oh, yeah. Like, nah, that's pretty stupid, Vince. She's going to kill somebody with that moonsault, too.
Let's talk quickly about Raw and SmackDown. So, you mentioned before why this Raw Championship feud for the Universal title might be taking place. Seth Rollins, AJ Styles. I think that's about as sure of a bet as any to have great in-ring performances. However, we saw their downfall. The promo setting up the contract signing was just a snooze fest. AJ just, I mean, I don't even know what he was trying to say. It was just really weird. He was saying Rollins is worn out or something. It made no sense. But I think we saw the best of them as well as the worst in that segment. AJ had hit an incredible flying forearm. I don't know if you saw that or not. It looked incredible. He's done stuff like that before. That sort of epitomizes the issue. Great in-ring guys, but it's a feud that people don't care about, and the ratings were terrible for that contract signing. So what do you make of this?
Look, AJ Styles, great in-ring performer, not the best promo guy. That's all. Let's be honest. He's never been the best promo.
So does that mean that he shouldn't be necessarily like a face of Monday Night Raw, or do you kind of just overlook that?
I get at this point you have to kind of overlook it, but that's what probably held him back most of his career. And then he's not a huge guy either. Let's be honest. Though I think the idea of you have to be huge is declining. Like Vince, I think, still thinks you need to be a professional bodybuilder to be a star, but I don't think that's the case anymore. Guys like CM Punk has shown that that's the case. Rollins to me is just okay on the mic. I don't know if that's going to make people upset, but
I think I would agree with that. He's good enough.
He's good enough. Is good enough to be a star? I mean, is what I'm trying to say. Is good enough. It means you're able to transcend wrestling.
Well, this is sort of the Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart thing, the low time of WWE before Austin and The Rock, when those guys were carrying the torch, right?
Like if you go to a hockey game or an NBA game, are they going to be showing a Seth Rollins catchphrase? Maybe burn it down, maybe. But is he going to be doing some type of intro on the Jumbotron where everybody?
Maybe in Iowa.
When I was in middle school, every kid was walking around with an Austin 316 shirt doing crotch chops. Honestly, it was everywhere. You don't get that now. I coach baseball. I umpire baseball. Like I can go to a 12-year-old, mention something about wrestling, and they go, "Oh, that's whack."
And kids aren't like, "Oh, he has a great work rate. He's a great in-ring." You know what I mean? Like that is appealing to the hardcore, lifelong fans, but not the broad audience per se.
Right, but you're losing an audience though. There's a generation that you just lost. I mean, okay, I guess you want 8-year-olds to watch, but who buys the merch? The parents. The parents have to be willing to take them to shows, and then once they get 13, 14, they have to still want to watch. These kids are then going off doing other things because wrestling isn't cool. And if it's corny, a 14-year-old, 15-year-old is not going to watch corny. It's just not going to happen.
Well, I don't even know who kids would like now. I mean, I'm guessing Roman's probably their number one guy, and Seth Rollins, but maybe AJ a little bit. It just seems like you don't have some of those guys. And it's because Vince a lot of times wants a total package. And he hasn't gotten out with some guys, and he tries to force it. You mentioned he loves, the bodybuilders. Well, Bobby Lashley, man, he was on Miz TV. Did we not learn over the past year and a half Bobby Lashley should not be doing promos, interview segments, anything, especially without the services of Leo Rush? It just seems like how many times do you have to put him in a situation to fail? And The Miz isn't going to make Bobby Lashley suddenly good at promos. And then the bizarre ending, Shane McMahon comes out, he's pulling double duty, beats up The Miz. That whole segment just epitomized the disaster that was Monday Night Raw this week.
Well, it epitomizes Vince McMahon. One, not learning from your mistakes. Bobby Lashley has the look. Let's send him out there to, do a talking segment.
I think he thinks Lashley will finally break out of his shell if they keep putting him in this scenario.
He's proven in a decade into wrestling, like he can't do it. Okay? And then having Shane McMahon appear, another Vince move. He thinks Shane equals ratings. That Shane is, the Vince McMahon name. When all else fails, put a McMahon on the screen, authority figure, evil McMahon. That's what.
Well, Stephanie will probably be coming out on Monday to kick off Raw.
If the ratings continue to fall, and she'll do something heelish. And the funny thing is that no one wants to see that. Yeah, it worked and it was fresh and it was new in 1997 and 98. This is 2019.
They haven't figured out how to get over faces other than having them against the Authority, and they sort of lucked into Daniel Bryan and Kofi Kingston, but I bet they'll sort of run that formula into the ground too.
Right, and they lucked in with Kofi Kingston, and yet it was so straightforward they had to go left, right, kind of like with Becky Lynch. You had a perfect straight line, exactly what to do, and you had to take all these different turns and kind of ruined it in a way. Like, he can't leave well enough alone. When he does find something and strikes lightning, it's like he has to tamper with it.
Well, Justin, they know exactly how to get Roman cheered. They put him against the B team with Elias as the special referee and Shane McMahon involved. This was so dumb. Like, I know this was more about Elias and Roman and really Shane and Roman, and the B team was just there sort of in the background. Good for Elias to get this, high-profile feud. But, let's think of this logically. You see, you might watch SmackDown, but you have to see, something has to pull you in. Something on the show has to be good. You see Roman against the B team. You're not watching that match, right?
No. Even if you're a huge Roman fan, why would you watch that match?
What if you're a huge fan of Bo Dallas?
Then you're a believer.
I mean, isn't that, the exact problem? Because SmackDown, I thought, was a rare, really bad episode this week. Usually it's, I would say, above average, worst case average. I thought it was very subpar.
And hell, with the Hardys dropping the tag team titles, that leaves 4 tag teams on SmackDown, all of which are pretty much jokes. So,
well, listen, I'm gonna put you on a spot, Justin. Who are those tag teams?
Okay.
Heavy Machinery, the B team.
Heavy Machinery.
Do you count Nakamura and Rusev?
Yeah, and the Colognes.
They don't even exist in anyone's mind.
I think that they're listed on the SmackDown.
So they just won't have tag team champions, pretty much.
If I'm an NXT tag team, I don't know. What's Bobby Fish doing? I don't know.
And you know what's crazy? As good as SmackDown got in the women's division with the reshuffle, the tag team division, we talked about how good it was, even if it was sort of repetitive. They had those 3 dominant teams, the Bar, the Usos, the New Day. Usos are gone. New Day probably done doing tag team stuff for a while. The Bar split up, which I don't know why, because I don't know if Sheamus is done, but we didn't even see Cesaro this week. So tag team on SmackDown is completely gone. It's pretty bad on Raw. That's what could be about 1/3 or 1/4 of your show has just been thrown out the window.
Yep. Yeah, it's a mess.
So we don't know what Dean Ambrose is doing. We know All Elite is beginning to really turn things up. What are you looking for over the next, what do we have, about 3+ weeks before their first pay-per-view?
There's been some signings, in the last couple of weeks. I'm going to be honest. I don't know every single signing. I'm not up on it. A lot of Japanese wrestlers, which is probably a good thing.
Not Kishido.
No.
He made his debut in NXT.
Are pretty damn good. I like that style over there. So that's always interesting to see. They do have blue pants. So for all the hardcore NXT.
Leva Bates, right?
Yes. If you watched it 3 or 4 years ago, you know exactly who we're talking about. And it's going to be interesting. We'll see what Money in the Bank brings. I'll be interested to see who wins Money in the Bank.
Who are your picks right now? Because I have pretty solid picks in mind. I'm fairly confident, unless they shuffle the entrance up.
I'm going to guess Drew McIntyre. And for the women's a little tougher. I don't. It's too. I don't know yet. I think that's still a little too early to. Who?
Bailey.
I don't know.
And you know what? Part of me thinks that if Sasha ends up not being in the match, Vince will do this just to make Sasha feel worse. Hey, this could have been you, but you left, so it's Bailey.
Could be. That would be a Vince move.
She's been getting a push on SmackDown. I mean, while losing, she's wrestled Becky and Charlotte, and this is they don't get everything wrong. Using Bailey in this capacity, fans are now interested in her. She could be Becky Lynch a year from now. I mean, that really could happen. They have.
The fans absolutely loved it when she turned on Sasha, and they just disregarded that like 2 weeks later. So
it's a fresh start for her. You now assume they're going to screw it up, but it is a fresh start, and there's an outside chance they make it right. And Drew McIntyre, they love heels that have the you can't say briefcase, but that have the contract. That's another thing, by the way. They need to stop with Vince being so weird about stuff that is inconsequential, changing names, banning certain words, so on and so forth. That micromanaging just adds up to really annoy people over time.
I would think he has to be a very hard guy to work for, extremely hard. I can see why a lot of people lose their minds.
Well, Justin, thank you for not losing your mind tonight. You kept your composure. I think it was good that we talked about a lot of the negative stuff and things outside of WWE because that really did overshadow what happened on Raw and SmackDown. I mean, at this point, those shows aren't producing must-see television. There's no doubt about that, right?
Right. And to me, I think most wrestling fans, at least the hardcore ones, this is what they want to talk about, what's going on outside of wrestling more than the product itself, because it's pretty blah right now.
I mean, the long-term hope, at least for me, I'm a lifelong WWE fan, is that it will improve because of it hitting rock bottom and there being other factors that force it to get better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a WWE allegiance. I mean, I think wrestling's at best when there's two major promotions competing against one another because it makes everybody step up their game. It makes wrestlers step up their game. It gives more opportunity for wrestlers, better pay. If you don't like what you're doing over here, you can go over there and make a star of yourself and vice versa. So to me, I want All Elite to succeed because I want two promotions again. That's when wrestling was fun. I think that's when wrestling's at its best. And if you do your job and if you're competing with somebody, it makes you want to better yourself, be better than that person.
I agree.
When there's no competition, you can just do just enough to get by, and it's acceptable.
And that applies more to Vince McMahon than anyone.
Right. And hopefully, by the time October rolls around and they get a TV deal and they're on weekly, we have something to talk about and look forward to. And not that they're going to be going head to head; they're going to be on different nights, but they're still going to try to one up each other with the content.
All right, Justin, we appreciate it as always. Good stuff. That's going to do it for this week. You can check us out by following on Twitter, 5-Star Pod Wrestle. You can follow our Instagram. Go back and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all the videos. I think we're up to about 75 total videos that we've done since we started a little more than a year ago. That's going to do it for this week. For co-host Justin Lowery, Sean Meyers signing off. We'll catch you again next week here on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.